Welcome, Bittersweet neighbors, to our fourth episode. Today we get bitter and sweet on McGolrick Park in North Brooklyn. Our guests today are Holly, Fairall, and Kate Yourke. I'm joined by Meredith Chesney and Danny Robo. Welcome.
Let's talk about McGolrick. We're talking about McGolrick a lot this morning, yesterday, and talking about teenagers in particular. And
McGolrick Park has seen a rash of pretty intense vandalism and destruction lately. I've been involved in park advocacy for McGolrick for about 2 years. Before that time, when we first moved to the McGolrick Park area in late 2001, the park was a mess, and I felt very sad that we had moved to that neighborhood because that's the only green space available, and it was dangerous and pretty much disgusting. And then about a year after that, we got an amazing gardener who pretty much dedicated his life to improving the park, and then it just became a paradise. And it was beautiful, the community was engaged. Dave offered workshops to the children about earthworms and how do rivers work, and got them really involved in the park, and it was great. I think he might have had some issues with higher management and applied for a supervisor job in Red Hook, and of course he got it, and almost the minute he left, the park began to degenerate again. And again, because it's our only green space in that section of Greenpoint, a lot of our social issues play out there. Mm-hmm. It's really a matter of appealing to a lot of organizations, various politicians, police, and trying to get everyone to work together to make it the best open space it can be. So I've been heavily involved in this for about 2 years. It's draining volunteer work, and we were just talking about Facebook. I'm a co-chair of the Friends of McGorlick Park, and to be honest, there's maybe, 300 members, and I don't know many of them at all. There's about 20 that I know are, very involved physically in the park. And I am so sensitive to all kinds of feedback. I really am. I have very thin skin. Even though I don't know these people. I shouldn't care what they say or, how they're criticizing me, but I do, and sometimes I get so overwhelmed that I just have to log off for a while,
I think that's part of organizing is people walk up to you and they're like, you know what you should do, you know what you need to do, you know what you have to do. It's like as soon as you hear anything like that, just flip it around and say, and how are you going to help this? What are you going to do?
That's very good advice.
Just those simple phrases. If anyone comes at you with any of those, just flip it back at them because you can't take that on. It's not fair.
But going back to the problems with the teenagers we're having in the park, something was coming to my mind as I was walking here is that kids generally, no matter where you are, tend to get naughty when they're bored. It's just that if you're living in a rural area or the suburbs, a kid who might be bored wants to feel a new experience, do something new, which might, not, it might be somewhat even dangerous, but because there's actually more space, it doesn't have the consequence that it does here. I think the real issue, and something I've wanted for years now, is to be able to offer more outreach, more programs to those teenagers within the parks that may be, graffiti writing, breaking things, setting fires, whatever. How can we engage them in some way so that they're not bored and can put their energies into something positive, and that not only, has better consequences for the community, but makes them happy too? And I just have not gotten any kind of real feedback on that on that issue at all.
From having gotten feedback from where?
From the local politicians, from anyone in the community who has any kind of suggestions on programs that we might be able to bring. Because we're talking also about, several kids, as in any group, who might have special needs of some sort, who need qualified counseling, guidance, mentoring, anything like that. Something that the average Joe might not be able to give that to them.
And they might need structure. They may have very unstructured time, especially
Right.
while school's out, and just having some reason to be somewhere
Right.
might be really
Probably have to
helpful.
find, there probably are models in urban settings that could be replicated successfully.
Well, Puente
They need-
has tons of programs in Southside. I don't know what's in Greenpoint. I don't know Greenpoint that well.
The only program that I am familiar with that is successful and kind of hits on this subject is the Greenpoint Youth Court, which takes kids who have been in some kind of trouble with the law, and instead of putting them through the penal system, puts them before a court of their peers. Their peers then judge them, give them some kind of sentence, which usually means community service. But within this whole program, they're receiving mentoring and counseling and education opportunities and finding out what their talents are and so on, so that they come out of the program in a much more positive way than they would have had they entered the penal
Yeah,
system.
I remember when that program started. It was so exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What is the roadblock to that happening now?
Very honestly, Esteban Duran from El Puente reached out to me probably 6-7 months ago. Very kindly offered services through El Puente and the Greenpoint Youth Court to these kids that have been causing problems in the park. I knew for certain that the park's manager had contact information for all of these kids, and when I asked if I could have their contact information, I was told no in a very nasty way, and that I shouldn't ask about that kind of thing again.
Well,
Without
they're
a
minors.
subpoena.
Right.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
minors, and so the Parks
Yeah,
Department
I don't
may
know if
have
they're-
some kind of exposure.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But how else do you get kids in this youth court program? Where is it you pick them up in that system
After
of
they've
interdiction,
already
after they've
gotten
offended?
in trouble, and that's what I'm talking about. I wish there was some kind of preventative,
Proactive.
yeah,
I mean, the thing is, I
proactive.
think you'd probably have to come up with something. I don't know that that exists already in this
Right.
area, but I think if you were to come up with something, you could probably get some minor amount of discretionary funding from our council people, but who would manage it? It's a need that needs to be fulfilled. Whether you're if you yourself would actually fulfill that, that's a big commitment.
It is something that I would like to pursue in the next couple of years, because there really is a need for it, and not that I'm terribly qualified, but do you mind if I go into a little bit of past history?
Sure.
So speaking about the Greenpoint Williamsburg area, a lot of people, especially now, choose to come here, but I just kind of ended up here by happenstance because in 1999 to 2001, I was living in Bushwick and teaching there at an alternative school for exactly this type of kid who may have been in trouble with the law, who may have very serious family problems, and it was the only program in the 5 boroughs that accepted 17-year-olds with 0 credits. It's a fabulous program, still in existence under another name. It's now called Bushwick Community High School. So I was living in Bushwick back then and met my husband, who was in Greenpoint, and that's how I ended up to be here. But during my time in Bushwick, I think I became very familiar with the struggles that teenagers face here. So it's something that I would like to pursue as some kind of community
Yeah, it
organization
sounds like
in
you would be
Greenpoint,
qualified.
because to my knowledge, nothing already exists like that.
Probably not. I think there's sort of compliance mentality in Greenpoint, so non-compliant teenagers might find themselves basically on the outs and not really, serviced.
Anyway, I go diagonally across the park almost every day. It's a shame that I don't know the name of the other street. What vanity.
Over to Driggs and Russell?
Driggs and Russell, thank
Yeah.
you. And when I see those kids, I've had a couple of experiences with them. They strike me as bullied, as though they're bullied. That was my intuition. Like many of them have been bullied. They seem to have that like kind of body language that suggests it. Overcompensating sometimes, or really submissive at other times. One time they tried to menace me with a snowball. I was walking to McGorrick Park to smoke a J, and I just said, I just looked at them throwing snowballs at people and really kind of terrifying people, but it was odd to me because I was like, these kids, they ain't shit, excuse me, from the kind of old school mentality. So I stood right in front of them and lit my joint and said, go ahead, give it a try, motherfucker. And so they all just ran. They all just ran. And right off the bat, I thought, these are kids who are... I've been in more dangerous parks.
Right.
I've been in parks where something like what I did would have gotten me torn limb from limb. I saw them yesterday, in fact, and there were 2 Parks Department vans, and there was a auxiliary traffic police van or something. I know there's no such thing as auxiliary traffic. I think it was just traffic. But there were police officers there, clearly assigned to look over these children. And the children looked like they were having the best time because somebody was paying attention to them.
That's the
Interesting.
problem. I think you're right. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that you think they have been bullied. I think not just bullied, I think several of them have been abused, and I know that many of them have been neglected.
Yeah,
That's the truth of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm not making excuses for bad behavior, but all this is coming out of a sense of just wanting somebody's attention.
Some of them are artists, You can see it, obviously.
Well,
tagging up all over the park, but...
Yeah.
And some of them are mad athletic. They've got some skills.
That
Those
too.
kids riding
That
those
too.
little bikes around and all the pavilions doing their stuff.
And they
if
play
they had
fight.
an outlet, I think it would be great to see an actual space where they're allowed to do that on their bikes instead of doing it up on that beautiful pavilion and, clunking away at it. There's room in that park.
Well, they found bond with each other. There are outlets that exist in the neighborhood. It's just that there's this transition between like just getting up and going through that door that a lot of them won't commit to ever because they found bond within themselves and may have perceived some kind of like abuse or victimization by whatever is on the outside of that bond. Because man, we've got the YMCA, we've got lots of things that these kids can do. There's a reason why they choose not to do those. So it's not a choice to do things. It's a choice. What's really important is that they have chosen not to do some things.
What's their parents' choice in this too? I mean, we don't know boo about what these kids' parents are thinking or doing, how they're
Right.
engaging their children, if they're making them do stuff, how much supervision and
Are
structure.
they even there?
Right.
You gotta wonder,
Because I think, it's, looking back on my, I didn't, my parents were not like taking me to activities and stuff like that, and so I was free range. I wasn't going to seek out structured activities for myself. Like that's kind of unusual, I think.
Yeah, you can-
They seem to have a lot of joy in each other's company, and I think that's fine. Much of like what I'm reading and perceptions are there's a separation between us and there they are, the children, whoever they are. I wonder if any of this can be dispelled if somebody just walks across the line and says, "Hey, what's your name?"
I think you're exactly right. However, people in the neighborhood do know that these kids carry various weapons and have a lady who lives 7 doors down from me reported at the police station that they held a knife to her dog's neck 2 nights ago
that's
as
too
she
bad.
was walking through the park. So there is a sense of fear, which is why I use the word qualified, that we need someone who's qualified to make that initial approach and then be able to offer options to them. You know what I mean?
I say we should invite them to an episode.
I would love that.
Have them
actually.
come and sit down and talk some shit, you know?
Absolutely.
Let's hear what
Hear what
kids,
they have to say, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be amazing.
Right. There's no account of theirs that I hear of.
Right.
I think that's a really interesting idea.
I will.
They might feel really put on the spot.
I'll
When
do
I-
that outreach.
When I had this confrontation with the children, some of them stood behind because they were absolutely baffled. And so they asked me, "What's your name?" They were asking me, "What's your name? What's your name?" And I walked away. I didn't give them my name. But there was a part of me that wished I did. But at the same time, I thought, these are a couple of them. I actually know I don't know their parents, but I know where they're from because they live right on Nassau Avenue across from the park. And so this young girl was following me, asking me what my name was, and I was like, don't ask me what my name is, because I was conscious of the fact that I'm a grown man, she's a young teenage girl, she lives right across the street from Nassau Avenue, it just doesn't look right.
Yeah.
And so I'm not gonna give you crazy, yo, here's my phone number, yo. That's she was like 12. It made me really sad. It made me really sad because just like we talk about with the artists and in these previous episodes where we say they're waiting on astonishment or they're waiting on inspiration. I feel that way about these children. They're waiting on some kind of inspiration. Every now and then they come up to talk to me and I deliberately, I say, "Don't talk to me." And they go, okay, but they keep talking to me. And I say, "Don't talk to me." But I'm obviously talking to them. So, but I feel it's because they need that. It's good for me too because I'm walking by. I don't want to see them. I've noticed that the homeless, one time there was a homeless guy walking through the park. His face was pulverized. I'd be shocked if he's still alive, honestly. His face was not full of knots and there was bruises everywhere and his eyes had closed from the beating that he had received. One time I asked one of them, because some guy asked for $1, I gave it to him and I said, "Who did that to your face?" Because he also had bruises. And he said, "Oh, I fell on the floor from drinking." Okay. That does happen, in fact. This guy, this wasn't falling on the floor. This was falling on the floor, maybe bouncing 1 dozen or 2 times. Somebody beat this guy, and I wondered if it was them.
Word on the street is that they did beat up one of our resident homeless guys, although technically many of them aren't homeless, but for simplicity's sake, that they did beat up one and videotaped it as well. So
That's terrible. If I find that kid, I'm gonna smack him.
And there
That
does
kid
need
needs
to
a
be
smack.
There
That
does
kid
need
right
to be
there.
intervention now. I think it's all well and good to talk about ideas to implement somewhere down the line for some intervention for these kids. But right now, it's totally unfair to that community. It's being held hostage by a handful of kids, really rotten behavior, and living in fear, not wanting to enjoy their own park because of this shit going on.
Well, those
The
homeless
only
fellows
part,
don't.
too.
Yeah.
The only part,
Yeah.
exactly.
on this subject and referring back to your previous episodes, I'm sure Kate feels the same way. These are the things that we think about as Greenpoint, Williamsburg residents, as moms. On the last episode, the War on Brunch, it was so foreign to me because I don't participate in that kind of lifestyle at all. So a lot of these problems, which are very real and need to be addressed, definitely as far as, this huge, dare I say it, hipster influx that's come in over the last decade, it's very foreign to me, and I'm not up to date on it a lot because these just aren't my issues. The things that I spend my time on, the important issues in my community, really revolve around how are my own children doing, what's available to them, how are other people's children doing, what are the issues we face as families. So that's where I'm coming from. How about you, Kate?
Every time I walk outside, I'm in shock as to what I missed because I just, it's very much tunnel vision when you have kids. Everything is corresponding to those relationships, and I so many things I've let fall, and I don't even know that I've let them fall. They're so far gone by now that. But I think it is also in terms of building community. Like in your school, you have a diverse, probably very diverse population. There's a way to build community through the interactions of our children and through these social spaces where other people who have children meet. And I think that those are things that would be really great, to develop. I mean, what you're talking about with these kids, I don't know if it's relevant, but I'm sort of course, I probably shouldn't say it because I haven't heard back from the principal since I sent in my proposal, but I'm proposing to do a maker space at Junior High School 126, and it's right here. It's pretty nearby, and since it's the only middle school in this area, there's sort of a opportunity to reach some of the, I mean, Junior High School 126 is a whole drama in itself, which, you know, I think really indicts the Department of Education in terms of how they allowed that school to go from a top school to one that people avoid, and what a disservice that is to our district, that the middle school that's, you know, located right between Williamsburg and Greenpoint, the only middle school accessible to Greenpoint, is considered, you know, not, you know, it's not a school that Greenpoint residents would choose to send their kids to, and that came about, you know, under the leadership of the Department of Education in full awareness of the deterioration of the school. Now they're putting a charter school in, which, you know, don't get me started on that because they're
We do want to get you
really-
started.
That school is a magnet school for environmental engineering, and so I have a proposal to do a maker space there. My qualifications are not so much in the engineering side, so I'm proposing to start it with a textile programs. They do textile. I'm an art teacher, and I teach textile, you know, any kind of design, printing, dyeing, whatever, and some simple sewing and stuff, so they could start making through that. But there's a lot of opportunity to do other things. I would really like them to learn some of the new technologies, 3D printing and CNC printing and stuff like that, and then maybe if we could carry it over to automotive high school, since they're in kind of a limbo with the DOE as well, so I'm not really sure. That's the proposal, but I wonder whether something like that could be an opportunity for these kids, because it's very personalized, very individualized, and it's local, and through hands-on work. I mean, I work with kids who have neurological differences, psychological issues, whatever. They're considered bright or gifted, but they have other special needs that make traditional learning environments really challenging for them. And they've actually been really trying to screen for aggression, because we've lost several teachers because of aggressive incidents. And so I'm not really dealing with that population per se, but in my many years of experience teaching art, the hands-on learning is a very approachable way for kids to really engage deeply with materials and develop their self-esteem and their sense of accomplishment, and to make things that are recognizable to other people and have recognizable value, rather than sort of art, which I think if you're not already inspired, then you may not really know why this collage is good or why it should make you feel good. Like, you may not really know whether your drawing is good or not good, and it just becomes a little more questionable. So I think, you know, a more pragmatic approach, you know, and it could be, I don't know whether the principal, considering, you know, he's new and he's really gotta like kind of get this whole ship floating after all the damage that's been done, whether he would want to welcome that as well. But he's a very community-minded person, and that may be a location for a program.
That would be wonderful. In fact, I've worked with quite a few of the kids there on projects in McGolrick. They've come to volunteer and help with an art show I did there. Wonderful kids. I believe her name's Peggy McCarthy. She's the parent coordinator at 126. She's lovely. Really a great set of kids that wants to do something, you know, that feels good about like getting out there and helping with the community, creating things.
I mean, it would be great. Environmental engineering includes engineering for the environment. I mean,
Right.
you have a park there, and maybe there are programs that could actually happen on the site of the park as well, you know, that so that the kids could start taking, because that's one of the things that in terms of turning around kids' behavior, like having a job or responsibility, having ownership of a space, having, you know, if they actually crafted, I mean, I know, you know, the skate park was a big thing, like, you know, on the waterfront, the kids that built that skate park then really took care of it to a point. And I think there may be a way that we can structure a way that they're contributing, and through that contributing, that can be very transformational.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I did put in proposals a couple years ago to have PS 110, St. Stan's, and PS 34, which are the three schools that surround McGorrick Park closest, to have their own community gardens, school gardens on each side of the park that each school would care for, give the kids a sense of ownership. But unfortunately that was denied by the Parks Department just because there are a lot of restrictions and regulations on what can and can't be planted and so on.
And the schools might not really be ready for that.
Right, it's a big project too, it's a big commitment.
Because I tend to be overly ambitious, and then when you actually get into the nuts and bolts, you see how difficult it would be with the kind of structure, time, and getting kids out and back in the building, and but you may be able to do a community service program that they do in combination. And I know that 126 is interested in building connections to the elementary schools in the area, so maybe that would be, unless the elementary school would be afraid to do that perhaps, but that may be, there may be some mentorship possibilities for but it seems like there's some fertile ground to connect those
Definitely.
dots,
Yep.
but I don't know that you want to combine that with, like, these kids have already kind of created an identity as outlaws, and so they're not gonna, they're gonna need their own.
I wonder sometimes though if they really have crafted this identity of themselves. I just think they're, irksome. I mean, again, I've never been beaten on or anything by them. I've had I've challenged them on a couple of occasions and never. I don't know what to say. When I look at them, they look bored. One time I was boxing in McGorrick Park. I came home and they were boxing, so I had the fever, and I wanted to go up to them and ask them, like, hey, you want to learn some stuff? Because they were being so clumsy. That's why I'm saying, like, when I look at them, I'm just trying to imagine them compared to, like, the kids in the South Side who were such skillful fighters. Where I grew up, dudes could really fight at a very young age, at their age. Those kids, come on, they can ride bike very well, they're athletic, but there's a difference between fighting. And of course, some fighters have an innate ability, and some fighters, it's raised in them. But I have yet to see any of that in this group of children.
We live in such a totally different world. I'm trying to imagine, like, if you were to have gone up to those teenagers and just start talking to them or whatever,
Right.
like, that's just such a different, it brings to mind all sorts of different notions. Like, adults can't do that in the modern world. You, as a 39-year-old young man, can't walk up to a bunch of teenagers and offer boxing lessons without people thinking certain stuff. Although
Right.
it's a totally innocent thing, my impulse sometimes as well, when I see kids fighting or crap going on, I want to go grab them by the ear and drag them back to their parents' house and have a talking to with them. And you can't do that. We don't live in that world anymore where it's okay to correct people's behavior. And yet we see that things have gotten pushed so far to where we are now as a culture kind of correcting people's behavior. I think it used to be kind of this notion of, like, oh, it's New York, you can do whatever you want to do, nobody cares. Which is, it's not though at all, because we live in such a cramped space that you can't do whatever the hell you want. You can't roll your wheeling baby crib up to a brunch spot that's a 4x4 and block the sidewalk with it, and that be socially
Did you
acceptable.
see the photo of that kid, Yourke?
I mean, is that a
No,
joke?
I
No,
wonder.
It's real.
It's real. Wow.
I felt like that was like just to get in the paper. Like, that's so hilarious,
Isn't it always?
No, they
to
couldn't
get
have
the
had that
paper
many
clip?
people in on the prank, though. They interview people at the restaurants, and not a one of them
I didn't read it.
was at all anything other than amused, and they talked about it all day. But not one of them, when it first happened, responded to it probably in an appropriate way, which might have been, well, it's fine this time, but maybe next time bring a stroller and let us find a spot for you. And let's not put it right here next to this bicycle that's also taken up half the sidewalk, leaving like the little 2-foot gap
Really?
for people to walk on down the
I mean, it
sidewalk.
must have been a joke.
No.
I saw the picture. I was like, this looks like.
I also thought it was a hoax, but unfortunately,
It's
there's so many
Well,
people
maybe
that.
they're just like, on something. I mean, that's just really.
Well, sure, they're on.
they're
something.
on themselves.
That's for sure.
It's
Yeah.
just it's in pure
Do you remember-
entitlement and just kind of doing what you want to do when you want to do it, because it doesn't seem like it would impact anybody. And there were a handful of commenters were like, why not? Who cares? Whatever.
You remember the case in the Lower East Side where some woman, European, left her toddler
yeah.
outside in a baby carriage and went inside to eat,
On, like, St.
and New York
Mark's.
media bugged out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, like, yo, lady, come on. You're going to leave your
Well,
child
she was
out
like
there?
Swedish, where they
Where
do
they
that all the
do
time.
that.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
that's
right.
nap time in the cold.
And it
they'll
became a
sleep
European,
good.
it became an international issue because then suddenly Sweden was weighing in on it. And it was like so preposterous. It was like, here we go, with this war on brunch nonsense or whatnot.
I don't leave anything unattended, not for a minute here, unless I want it
Well,
to
but I think
disappear.
when you're a parent, like you're subjected, like first of all, you have this like incredible anxiety that like is just hovering around you when you have your baby, and and I think, everybody's ready to market to you to like try to quell this anxiety because you're like, oh my God, I have so much responsibility. This baby's so vulnerable. And you're just like in this state of managing anxiety, and and then you're like, in your bubble, of just like keeping the whole thing kind of rolling along. I don't know. Parents aren't really that rational.
That's
Doing the best you can, and I also think that if you don't have a compliant, well spoken child who's exhibiting good behavior, then it's open season on advice. You're just an advice magnet walking down the street, and everyone can make their day by giving you advice as to how.
But a lot of
someone
that advice
should
on the
show
children in this park is punitive. In fact, almost all of it. It's all enforcement and punitive measures. And when we're talking about parenthood, I'm not a parent, but my guess is a lot of it is nourishing and a lot of it is cultivated and considering the welfare of the child. This is not the same thing.
Well, those kids, their parents aren't there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the problem too. The question really, does the community, the neighborhood is not their parents. You know what I mean? I feel like we need to offer them options, no doubt. Something to entertain their idle hands and enhance them, like let them find their talents, whatever. But I don't know, is it actually the community's responsibility to parent them? I don't know.
Well, you're just not able to. I mean, I don't know whether, even if you decided it was your responsibility, would you be able to? Or-
Well, I mean, are we talking about parenting? Is that really what we're talking about? No, we're talking about being social partners with these children. We're not talking about parenting them. We're talking about the fact that they live in a park that we all enjoy and we all have to live together. And how do we figure out these people being less irksome to us than they already are? And do we convince them that in fact they're legitimately irksome? Do they even care? They might not even care. We may never reach them, but if we do reach them,
Well, there's a website and the guy's work that I'm really promoting, sort of, that it's called Lives in the Balance, and it's the guy's name is Ross Green, and he's probably a behavioral psychologist or something like that, and he's developed this program. It's very, very simple, and it's being used in incarceration facilities for youth and school systems and stuff. And I would really love it if our district would adopt it as a whole district. But the principle of this very simple system is that children do well when they can. And you have to, so there's a certain lens. He talks a lot about like the lens that you look at something in. So if children do well when they can, so what's getting in the way of them being able to do well? So then you have the expectations, and he always has this double hand, like two hands crossed, crossing the fingers. You have your expectations of the child, you have the child's ability to meet those expectations. When conflict results, then that means that the child does not have the ability to meet your expectations. So you can drop your expectations and therefore avoid the conflict, or you can modify them, which is a complex process, or you in the process of modifying them, you're trying to build the child's skills and build their ability to meet your expectations. So this punitive idea, the idea that you can punish somebody into growing skills, is pretty dumb. I mean, it's not. There's this great guy, LaRue, who's a special ed teacher and very, very funny speaker, and he was saying, like, this teacher brings this kid in, and he's like, I've made this kid stay late after school and he's missed recess for 2 weeks and he still hasn't brought in his homework. He's like, circle the slow learner in this picture.
Oh man.
It's like, you can't just punish kids into developing their skills. It's not going to happen. I mean, kids do sort of come with like enough yearning to learn and yearning to please generally that you've got something to work with, but just punishing them isn't going to grow their skills. So you have to identify what their lagging skills are and create opportunities for those skills to grow through this process. So he developed this thing called collaborative problem solving, and that's where you basically, when the pressure is off, when they haven't just been given a consequence for something, or when their stress level is really down, then you say, so I noticed that you were, I don't know, in this circumstance, I don't know, I don't know your situation at all, so I don't want to like try to propose anything specific, but say it's like, I noticed that you've been really hostile to your sister lately. What's up with that? And then you just really try not to start telling them about how difficult this is for everybody and how much trouble they're going to be in, or like all these things that parents and other authority figures start to do. You really try to get them to talk, and that would be the first step. And then you get information from them. You kind of like draw out as much information as you can. Then you say, well, this is a problem for me because. So what do you think of that? And then you, again, just, so, I mean, we could try something like that, with these kids. But I think the premise, like the lens is, first of all, that they do well when they can. So why are they not? So they're not bad kids. I think a lot of people would rather just start to like shave them off and put them on the ice float and send them off to sea.
This is what we see happening, and you see it a lot around McGolrick already, of people that are ready, that know that they know that these kids are already on that road
They're
to
bad.
jail. They're bad kids. This
so
is
therefore-
like a gateway to a homicide or more something down the line. And I wish we had a crystal ball and really knew, but like I think somewhere in the
what would you
middle,
do even if you knew?
well,
What would be your options?
I don't know. I mean, I thought people are talking about, putting cameras in the park, more surveillance, more responsiveness, and like I know it's a really complicated scenario because people want to see it needs to stop right now, and there's really nothing that we can flick a switch and implement today that's going to really make that happen. I mean, we got a lot of work ahead of us.
I think they also need to learn to manage their anxiety because they're in a situation where they have this sense of ownership over this turf, and something's happening that they're not in control of that's really negative, and they're getting all wound up. And like everybody needs to examine where they stand in this situation, what they're contributing to it. I mean, if they have the desire to be extremely punitive, then they may be sending those kids into an outcast position, and if they're young enough, I don't think that's really a right thing to do. I mean, if they're after a certain age, you kind of have to say like you're, I'm sorry you didn't get with the program up to this point, but we're not really. You can't really be treated as children. Like now that since these sound like very young people,
Actually,
we can
these
say
kids are 15 to 19.
so we're at that bridge where like. I think
where they're about to get locked up.
I think exactly. I mean, where society's going to step in and set limits, and that's
the switch, by the way. That's the switch. That's the unfortunate switch that exists that people will turn on in a second because we've seen it happen before. I know I have. And honestly, those kids don't deserve to be on the inside.
Not only that, what are they going to learn there? Who are they going to learn to be? That's not. I mean, if you're going to create an umbrella that actually shelters the community, then but I think it may help if you're selling this as a program to focus on the fact that, like you said, that a 12-year-old girl, you're kind of like, okay, we need to save the 12-year-old girl. You know what I mean? Like a
going up to me, it's
19-year-old
like, yo,
boy who may have like held a knife to a dog. I mean, who does that? Beating up a homeless person. Like these are very abusive, very sick things to do, and you may not get much cooperation from people to try to like create an environment where somebody where they think that's their persona that they've developed, that they may not be welcome.
The impression I've gotten is there are very few people who are interested in this kind of relationship with these young people. Much of what I've read, for me, strikes me as, if I read between the lines, the feeling that I get is, hey, why don't we just get the police to get in there and just sweep through?
Fear is a powerful thing, Dennis. And you there is patterns will emerge from behavior that does escalate. And you do have to wonder, what is the next thing? Like blowing up the cans of paint might not have gotten enough attention. And they do up the ante. I remember being a teenager very, very well. And, you know, kids are creative as hell when they're bored.
So they blew up cans of paint? I didn't hear about
Then they
this.
set some cans of paint on fire or something.
Officially, from the 94th, it is all under investigation right now. They cannot confirm or deny any of the specifics. But what it looks like is that the fuse box, this is 4 days ago maybe, the fuse box that is attached to the side of the maintenance shack was ignited in one way or another. The firefighters came and put out the fire. Whether or not the main entrance to the shack was opened by the firefighters or the perpetrators, we don't know. But later then, the shack was burglarized and cans of paint that were in the shack were dumped all about the park then. So
I can see why they're asking for cameras. Like, there's a lot of stuff
there's
going
a
on.
lot. It's not just like a tag here or there. Entire rows of benches have been ripped out.
Yeah, I saw that
Cans of
article.
paint have in the past been dumped on top of the monitor statue's head.
Yeah, I saw that too.
You know, animals have been killed and decapitated. You know, it really does verge on the very violent. And I think that really is that's where the anxiety comes from in wanting to approach this group. It's bizarre.
I mean, I wonder whether there may be like there may be somebody that is really turning this into a dark, like this, what might have been, you know, I spent my entire, you know, early teen years in the park, but I wasn't doing that, you know, like there may be somebody there that's helping turn this to a dark direction. You may be able to like get more information. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like it's crying for attention because, you know, I did dark things in the park. I was members of gangs and we rumbled and we fought. And I remember one of our common adversaries was Polish mob. And just a couple of nights ago, I ran into some dude that I fought with in the park who had stabbed me in the arm. But I was really kind of, it was emotional almost because I felt like I had learned how to forgive. When I saw him with his wife and he was telling me he had children, I was very happy for him. I didn't have this mindset like, I'm gonna get this guy, he stabbed me in the arm, come on.
Are we comfortable with the idea of the police department or the parks department being the ones monitoring cameras if we did find a way to do some surveillance in the park? Or is this something that maybe a community watch group would be the ones in control?
At this point,
monitoring?
the idea of cameras in the park is just very initially being discussed because this neighborhood has never had anything like that, and I think like a lot of people feel uncomfortable with that option. You know, we have to discuss the specifics. Is this going to be permanent or temporary? Who's monitoring it exactly? What are we trying to actually see? I think at this point, it's just we're just trying to find out the general comfort level of people, specifically who live right around the park. How do you feel about video cameras being in there generally? And then hopefully in about 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to have another meeting where we can discuss those more specific aspects of surveillance.
Right or wrong, given the transformation that the neighborhood, the entire area is undergoing, if you put video technology in that park, even if it's seemingly temporary, it'll set a precedent. That's
Something
gonna
would be a target for vandalism itself.
But
maybe.
one thing I would like to ask all of you about is, this really applies more to Kate, I suppose, but what is it that separates my boys from those kids in the park? I think there are certain like social class issues that have developed within these two neighborhoods that that need to be addressed too. What are the what are the challenges that those kids in the park might face that my boys wouldn't, that maybe your girls wouldn't. Do all the kids in living in the city face the same challenges? You know, that's something I'd like.
It's not. I don't want to generalize about. I really know nothing about the whole situation. I don't go to McGolrick Park very often. I think it's lovely. I'm horrified to hear what's happening there. I don't want to generalize about those kids, but I'm guessing that just with the way the Polish population here has grown in that area, a lot of it through workers who are really sacrificing their own well-being in order to provide income for people who may not even live here, and their loneliness and suffering, they're really, they're not really being supported themselves, and there's a lot of drinking, kind of addressing that, emotional anguish or whatever. I would just guess that some of those impacts or risk factors for those kids, which are not risk factors for your kids, which puts them in a very privileged position, and seeing the whole neighborhood turn, the whole compass of the neighborhood is shifting, to follow the magnet of the money and where all the privilege is. It's really, those kids are going to be left really behind. They're not, in the past when we didn't have the economic diversity that we now have, the issues of children in the neighborhood, like, they all struggled with similar issues, and depending on their home life, and how that set them up, or their own just, neurological, psychological, astrological bearings, and how they were searching the ways that they were engaging in the world, but now I think the attention is going to be focused on how to make this a safe place for the people who have expectations that come from somewhere else, where these issues don't impact the children in that way, or at least where they've been able to marginalize those issues so that people, kids can. We have these little, picket fence pictures of what it is that you're supposed to be living in Brooklyn for, and you spend a whole lot of money to live around McGolrick Park. In one lens, it can look really, really pretty and awesome and European and really like beautiful and valuable, and then you take the lens to the other side and it's like, that's pretty scary, that's pretty dark stuff that comes from like a free-ranging kind of identity that this neighborhood did have, where it was really wild. People were not supervised, they were not monitored, regulated. The Newtown Creek oil spill, like, it wasn't even just the kids that were running wild, it was everybody was running wild. When they dug up when they changed the BQE on and off ramps, and when I moved here, I used to live on Metropolitan Avenue, and they dug out the old foundation for the off ramp for the BQE, and all of a sudden there's like a million guys in moon suits walking slowly in formation, spraying down the dust. I'm like, what the hell, And it was, they had a big empty hole where the foundation was, and some paint company decided to throw all their lead and cadmium into the hole. Like, this is routine around here. So, I just worry that people are gonna forget, like, it's gonna be all kind of the buzz of like, where's the new bar, the new coffee shop, the new baby boutique, and how precious our children can be. And look how cute she looks in this outfit in the park. I want the gardens, I want the flowers, I want the farmer's market, I want, all of these things. And what I don't want is to deal with these other people's children.
Right.
Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we have. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/bittersweetbrooklyn. I'm Dennis with Meredith, signing off from Brooklyn. Peace.